Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to CYP Now's Spotlight interview, which is accompanying the special reports on mental health in schools, which will appear in the July edition of CYP Now. I'm delighted, my name is Derren Hayes, I'm the editor of CYP Now, and I'm delighted to be joined today by author, parenting coach, and Chief Executive Officer of the Happy Confident Company. Welcome, Nadim Saad.
Thank you very much, Derren. Thank you.
Nadim is one of the key people behind the 10 Minutes Matter campaign, which is calling on policymakers to build 10 minutes of mental well-being activities into the school day. We hear lots of statistics, Nadim, about rising prevalence levels of children and young people with mental health conditions. For example, 1 in 6 young people now report having a probable mental health condition, up from 1 in 9 in just the last 5 or so years. So set against that context, what do you think are the key figures or statistics that illustrate the scale of the need in this country? And what do you think are the main contributory factors for this?
Thanks, Derren. Great question. I mean, you've already stated the biggest ones. It's actually, people are now talking about 1 in 5 children between the age of 5 and 14 who have a diagnosed mental health challenge every year. And what you just said, actually, there's a 70% increase in the last 5 years. That's how bad it's getting. And the other super important stat is 70% of these mental health challenges are diagnosed too late. As in, too late meaning they become much bigger challenge than they could have been if they had been identified earlier, which is understandable. That's why we really believe that early intervention is key. And so what we're seeing is the main reasons for all these challenges. COVID is obviously contributing to this, but now post-COVID, there's actually also an acceleration of things, an acceleration of everything we're doing, and so everyone's kind of running around, and there's a lot of anxiety in the system that was created not just by COVID, but generally. There's much more anxiety in the system. There's much more negativity. And we hear children as early as 6, 7, 8 talking about the crisis, the cost of living crisis, about the war in Ukraine, about things about climate change, which is like, things that we would talk about much later. They're now all confronted to this very early on. And they feel absolute no sense of agency on that. As you can imagine, they have no control over this, but it's their world. It's what's shaping in their world. So it makes them very anxious. So children are generally more attuned, much more. They absorb everything, so they actually absorb energy and feelings much more than we do, because we've got much more of we know how to shield ourselves from some things, or we completely cut off. Like that was my case for many years until I did quite a lot of therapy to stop being cut off of my feelings and suppressing them. So it's opening up, and the children are opened up. They actually absorb a lot of this, so they absorb other people's anxiety. It's not just theirs. We tend to think that, why is my child anxious? Well, because look at everyone around them. There's a lot of anxiety. That's the main reason. But there are several other reasons. One of them is they're always on. It's very rare now that a child has a time to get bored or to not do anything and to just be contemplating. They'll just be always on because there's always screens somewhere. Even if they don't have phones at a certain age, but there'll be an iPad lying around, or they'll be bored. Therefore, they'll ask for, a game or to do something, and then the reaction of the parents is, "Oh, I don't have time." If it's the case, either they'll do something with them, or I don't have time, and then here's an iPad or whatever. And even in schools now, there obviously devices are much more. And in schools, everything is so crammed. There's hardly a part of. Thankfully, there's recess time. But usually everything is, we talk about, we've got this campaign, the 10 Minutes Matter campaign, and it's about bringing 10 minutes a day of mental health in schools. And some schools manage to tell us, but I don't know where to find 10 minutes. But what if the 10 minutes give you better behavior in children? It gives you more adjusted children, self-regulation, so obviously, which leads to better behavior. Gets teachers to have more time to teach because everyone's feeling better. They go, yeah, of course it's important, but we're not sure where to find it. So basically, we've managed to distill this to 10 minutes a day through different programs, and it's amazing. But even then, schools and other settings tell us they don't have the time. And that's the problem we have, is we're so full on all the time. And I'm now saying we, because it works for adults too. There's a lot of research that shows that we've got a lot less attention as adults. It's mainly because of devices, but it's also but also because of notifications, because of this idea that we're always on, and therefore we don't.
So they kind of the 24/7 nature of the information, the absorption of information, and the fact it's constantly throwing information at us, but also the lack of time perhaps to also take stock of it and process it. Are they essentially kind of like contributing factors then to the scenario?
Totally. So we lose the focus, and then we got into a bit of anxiety because it's going so fast, and because we've lost our focus and we realize we haven't done what we were supposed to do and things like that, and the anxiety just increases. We just don't know where the time's gone, and that's what's creating. And then there's the unlimited number of choices that we have, and even for children, they've never had so many choices. Their brains is not developed enough. Their prefrontal cortex takes until the age of 24 to be developed. The prefrontal cortex, which is the rational part of the brain, the one that enables to take rational decisions, to really know how to, for example, take care of overwhelm, to reduce an overwhelm or anxiety. Well, this is still in development. So if there's too many choices, too many things, just very difficult for the children to comprehend, and therefore that's why we really need to do something about it, and that's what the 10 Minutes Matter campaign is about.
So before we go on to find out more about the 10 Minutes Matter campaign, let's just think a little bit more about the how that manifests, that scenario you just described, kind of manifests itself for schools, who of course are kind of on the front line of this, and children will be at school for probably a significant proportion of their day, most likely. And how do you think schools are? What's the current response from schools and policymakers? Obviously, kind of like set the overarching framework for that. How is that kind of like coping, do you think, with meeting the needs of the young people and their mental health needs currently?
So I don't want to sound too negative, but there is so much more that needs to be done.
It's a big challenge, isn't it?
It is a big challenge. And the biggest challenge is because teachers and head teachers and all this, they're already overwhelmed. They already have way too much on there. They have too much admin, have too much stuff to do. They have too many choices to make. They don't even know which provider they have to go to. And the majority of interventions are, you've got to create a new lesson plan to now not only become a teacher, but also almost a counselor to the children. And so you've got to do all of these things on top of your job. Well, they can't cope. Let's be realistic here. That's the biggest problem. But now I must say the silver lining of COVID and of all the challenges, mental health challenges that we've seen, so it's very negative, but the silver lining is finally educators across the board are realizing that mental health is not nice to have, now it's a must have. But they're still faced with the conundrum. So, okay, well, now we know it's a must have, but what do? We don't have time to teach. And that's why programs that only take 10 minutes a day are so important, because actually it's more effective to do 10 minutes a day than doing a whole hour. That's what we've proven, because the science of behavioral science, the science of habits show that 10 minutes of something you do regularly is much better than something you do once a week or once every 2 weeks. And so that's a really important aspect. So, and why it's become a must-have is because children as young as 5, 6 are now getting out of the system because they're not managing to self-regulate. They've been at home where parents have not always done the best job of, helping them find the right framework. And they're not managing their emotions. And because of the increased anxiety, decreased speed, all of this are contributing factors to the fact that children are more difficult to handle. So teachers, carers, everyone actually, have more difficulty with children nowadays. And that's why it's essential that we put the things in place that help the children, come back, self-regulate, behave better, and all of that.
When you speak to teachers or practitioners who work with children, young people in education settings, what do they tell you about how they are seeing anxiety, children's anxiety, and other mental health conditions? What are they telling you about how they see that kind of manifest itself in behaviour? Are they talking about disengagement? Are they talking about it's kind of like obviously not attending school as much? Are they all factors?
Yeah, I was going to think you continue the list, and I'll say yes to everything you say because that's exactly. Social anxiety is on the rise. We just did actually a webinar with the founder of a great app. With the Happy Company, and she was talking about social anxiety and how it's still on the rise, and what we can do about it, obviously, as well. We were talking about disengagement is certainly one, and a lot of anger. So a lot of difficulty so it's a kind of mix between anger, overwhelm, and it's really sad. So obviously teachers are very sad for the children, but the problem is they have to handle in a class of 30 or more, and that's really difficult. And independent schools, it's easier, but even there, so all the children seem to be relatively happy. When they look at the staff and they do well-being surveys, they realize actually there's a lot of undetected issues that once you do the survey and you do the work, you realize, wow, thank God we did that, because they, at 13, so let's say we take kids in 7, 8, 9, and then at 13 it could have been self-harm, which is why there's so much self-harm. There's so much. There are real challenges. So as the more they grow, the more they suppress better, but it becomes bigger problems, because then it becomes, so disengagement is bigger, and then there are classes where there are 50% of 13-year-old girls who are self-harming, and then the other 50% feel that they're not fitting, so they actually fake it to be part of it. So now where are we going? I mean, this is not the world we want to create. We really need to do something about it. So, and a lot of people are doing. So don't get me wrong, a lot of people are trying, but a lot of the interventions, as I was saying, currently are, okay, you've got to create a whole lesson plan. You've got, we bring all of these great resources, but we're adding so much work on it. And that's why what's important is to reduce intervention in time and to make it through resources that are really easily accessible and that can be deployed very quickly. So, for example, we've got a video program to teach children about life skills, about self-regulation, about resilience, about the failure, about understanding that failing is not that bad. We can learn from failing, understand how their negative thoughts, that they actually have to identify their negative thoughts and then convert them into more helpful thoughts, because otherwise, they get overwhelmed by these. So all of this has to be really easy to access and easy to use.
Could you explain for the viewer where you think the kind of 10 Minutes Matter campaign and some of the resources that come with that, where you see it kind of fitting in? The reason I ask that question is because, as like you just said, there's a lot of work that schools are doing in this area, and they are working with third sector organisations and the NHS, obviously, to develop more mental wellbeing kind of infrastructure in schools. On top of the fact that there's also now statutory health education, so there are things going on at that kind of like that almost preventative level to try to educate, but also at the range where obviously problems are occurring, and then the school is part of helping the child to find a solution to that, whatever, a therapeutic solution to that. Where do you think the gaps are, though, and is it about purely kind of like having the sufficient resources to cope with demand, and is it also perhaps about kind of like a culture as well, about how we talk about mental health problems or mental well-being, and obviously kind of like integrate that into everyday discussions, I suppose.
Yes, all of that is very relevant. So in essence, so it has to be integrated in the day. So and ideally make it a whole school program. But you have to ideally use a modular approach, because some schools don't have time. But for example, something that's completely free, and we advocate for any school that could completely change, as well as across the board in all the sectors, basically the care is mentoring. And mentoring in that sense, I'm talking, for example, about having mental health, champions or well-being champions. So the year sixes, the 11-year-olds, for example, helping the 8, 9-year-olds, the 9-year-olds helping the 6-year-olds. This is free, and this doesn't need even 10 minutes a day, because it's basically they're there. They just need a bit of training, and we can train them through videos, which is amazing. And then they're there to support other children, and the children who don't want to go to adults know that they can go to other, and then their older peers are so proud to have felt that they could help a younger child. So this on its own is creating this attitude of kindness, of compassion, of helping each other out that we want to see in our society. And why is it not done across the board? It should be almost mandatory. This is easy. So that's one of the things that we always advocate when we work with schools. But the others where basically you bring in resources, for example, when I say 10 minutes and an answer to the schools who say, well, I don't have 10 minutes, who say, 1 second, do you not have 5 minutes in the morning at registration and maybe 5 minutes in the afternoon just after recess? Just cut recess by lunchtime and after recess 5 minutes. Like, oh yeah, we could probably find that. Okay, so what do you do in these 5 minutes and 5 minutes? Well, ideally, you actually first teach children about feelings. Because what's missing in all this self-regulation is rather than, I don't know if you've seen the 2022 report from the government on behavior and how to get the behavior, but it is catastrophic. It is absolutely, it's not based on, so I don't know how it's possible that the government doesn't have psychologists who really work for really, well established and who can give better ideas than just using rewards and punishment, because that's gone. We know that for children to do better, they have to feel better. That's why well-being is so important. And there are great ways to do it. So you have to get to the bottom of the behavior, why this is happening. And the bottom of the behavior is actually often about feelings. So very quickly, I'm going to show you one of the things that we use is our Feel It cards. That's a great tool for intervention, whether in schools, foster care, just all kinds of settings that will use them. Because you can go basically what I am feeling and what I want to feel. And by just doing this exercise from going from feeling, red feelings such as overwhelmed, anyway, you understand, or anxious, and or in the blue feelings, so low energy but negative feelings, and you want them to transform into I want to feel, the blue feelings, the green feelings, or the yellow feelings, the high energy and positive and pleasant. So just by doing that exercise and helping children find the strategies to go from what they are feeling to what they want to feel, children have a tool for life of realizing, okay, feelings are impermanent, and I realize why I'm feeling this way. Never ask a child, by the way, why are you feeling this? Because it creates more anxiety. That's another way, actually. We create anxiety in children by just asking, why are you doing this? Well, I don't know, I hit this boy because I'm a bad person. Just great example. 10-year-old child hitting another child at lunchtime. The mental health lead takes him in her office and says, okay, let's do a bit of feel it. What are you feeling? And what were you feeling, rather, when what happened? He said, of course, he picked up angry. But he then picked up embarrassed. He said, oh, what were you embarrassed about? Not why were you embarrassed? What were you embarrassed? What and how replaces why. And then he said, well, I actually tripped on this boy's foot, and then I saw people laughing, and therefore I got angry and I hit him. Like, oh, okay, well, let's deal with embarrassment. How do you deal with embarrassment in the future instead of hitting, who's not, you could be expelled for this. Let's actually work on strategies for you when you feel embarrassed in the future, what we can do about it. So she got at the bottom of what happened, and then she could help him. And now he's going to know how to deal with embarrassment. That's what we want for our children. So the first part of the day is to feel it, check in, understanding if some children may come from home or wherever they were, if it's not schools, and with really big feelings and difficult feelings. So first identify this, help them out, and then they're ready for learning, because and then sometimes they don't even understand why, and it doesn't matter, because it's not the why. It doesn't have to be understood in each situation. What needs to be understood is, okay, if I did manage to find why, it's okay, because I don't, you're aware of the name it to tame it. When you name a feeling more specifically, it reduces the intensity of the feeling in the brain. So you automatically feel more in control of it. So that's where the science behind all of this is you want to name the feeling, and then instead of suppressing them, which actually takes some of your cognitive load, because you're busy, actually your mind is busy suppressing the feeling, which is not what we want. We want to let it out and let go of it with the information taught us. So that's the main, one of the main principles that we would like, principles. And then the other one is teach them the toolkit that they need to thrive. So from an early age, we teach them what we call the 10 powers, the 10 characters that they need to thrive, all the way from the power of introspection, so understanding self-awareness, understanding themselves. Then we go into the power of optimism. That's actually understanding our thoughts and the fact that sometimes we have negative thoughts. But when we have them, instead of just taking, oh my God, everything's done. The whole reason I launched the company is because my daughter at 8 told me I hate myself. And I thought, wow, but I don't want anyone to feel like this. I'm going to create tools to make sure that no one else feels like that. But with time, I actually realized it's not about not feeling this way. It's actually about, because I was the lucky guy, I was a parenting coach already, and I taught my daughter to actually be able to say this. A lot of kids wouldn't have actually expressed this. And if they don't at this age, it could become self-harm at 13.
Yeah.
Therefore, it's really important for them to have this. That's what we're trying to create it. And we hope that everyone can create in school. It's a safe environment where kids realize they can share these things, even if they're uncomfortable. But it doesn't mean that the teachers become counselors. I want to make sure, or the foster or whoever the carers, they don't become counselors, but they have the simple tools to help children express it. And if there is a further need, for a counselor, then it gets referred. But at least 90% of the problems at least get solved there and then, and the children start getting the toolbox. So just to finish on the toolbox, it's this power of being detective of their thoughts, detective of their feelings, and then have the tools to become more resilient, to understand that there's a gift in every failure so they can fail, understanding that they are all creative and they can develop this creativity, and developing kindness and compassion, developing their growth mindset, the fact that they can be good at anything if they put their minds to it, because we teach them how their brain works. And the fact that most children don't know that their intelligence is not fixed and they can grow this intelligence. And by practicing, they develop new neural pathways. That's called neuroplasticity. And when you develop new neural pathways, things become easier. So even if someone thinks that they're not good at math or not creative, they can actually develop it. By just learning this, you empower children to know that they can do anything. So that's what the things that it should be taught at school. It should be part of the curriculum. And it's not. That's why we had to create programs to make it part. And what's amazing is the fact that in 10 minutes we can develop them, because it could be 5 minutes of a video just explaining how the brain works, which we call it our Happy Company TV program. And Emma Willis presents it. And she introduces all these power with a crazy professor and with a lot of children who also give testimonials of that they also feel this way. And so a child, seeing another child say, oh yeah, sometimes I would also think that I don't like myself, and it can be tough. It makes them, aware of it, and it's okay. But then we give them the tools, because we don't want to leave them in that. It's not just about it's normal, because then you get entitled children say, yeah, it's normal. I'm feeling or thinking like this. It's how do I transform this?
When we do a bit of crystal ball gazing, do you think that will be, just finally to finish on, do you think that will be, how you would envisage schooling in the future, maybe say 5-10 years time, pupils, young people who are kind of more in tune with their feelings, and this being almost kind of the accepted norm, really, a part of their day, a bit of kind of a bit of self kind of work, as it were, almost, as part of their everyday education experience. I know obviously you'd love that to be the case, of course, but are you seeing in the conversations you have, the feedback you get, whether it be with practitioners or policy people in the kind of policy world, are you hopeful that will be the case?
What a great question. I would say that I was at the Times Education Summit last week, and we heard of the shadow administrator, basically. You hear politicians, you just think, oh my God, we're so far. There has been 10 ministers of education in the last 10 years. The problem is there isn't enough priority on education because the governments are not staying for long enough. And that's why, even though we're obviously hoping there's going to be policy around 10 minutes a day, we'll see. Hopefully it happens, but we think it has to happen it's a grassroots. And what I'm seeing is, despite this really scare around AI, because there is a big scare of how it's going to change the education system. My purpose was changing the education system in 15 to 20 years, because it takes that long to actually affect. But actually, the fastest way to change something, it's like with COVID, the silver line of COVID is this fear that it created, because it then made us change a few things. And the same with the education system. AI now is going to, because the threat is not a 10-year threat. It's a threat in the next 2-3 years. Therefore, policymakers have to make a change. And the change is going to be in assessments. It's going to be in the way we're teaching, in the curriculum, because why are we teaching things that AI can do? And how are we addressing children's concern? Because we were interviewing at the COBIS Council of British International Schools. Lord Jim Knight interviewed 3 students in front of 600 people. And they all said, well, we're worried because we don't know if we're going to have a job in the future, because AI might take over. They don't have an answer. They have no control over this. So it is worrying for them. But if they're taught the skills of creativity, the skills of actually how to learn better, how to learn, because that's what metacognition, we need to teach all, if you ask ChatGPT, Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, interviewed ChatGPT in a podcast, asking what should be done in education, because is there a problem in education? What should be done to improve it? And ChatGPT answered, number one, more social emotional learning. So exactly what we're advocating. More critical thinking and problem solving skills, more equality, and more personalized learning. That was the score. And that's what we need to teach children. So I think that in the next 10 years, thanks to AI and in part, we're finally going to go there. And this is going to be part of our daily life, because what we're here to, the reason what school is great, and a lot of people are taking their schools out of the system, their children, and homeschooling, which is really sad, because actually the purpose of school is to create the sense of community, is to actually enable children to learn how to better deal with others. So they go through challenges, yes, but you don't take them out of the system. On the contrary, they have to deal with that so they can learn from their peers. That's what we want to create at schools. And that's what the programs are about creating this sense of community, this sense of compassion, this sense of I can help each other out, you help each other, and then we'll have a much better society. So yes, I do believe it's going to happen, but not because of policymakers. No, unfortunately.
They'll have to catch up pretty quick by the sounds of things.
Exactly.
And that's a good positive note to finish on. So thank you very much indeed. We'll stop there.